The ancient gods of Princess Mononoke originally flourished on the earth 20,000 years ago, kind of like Cthulhu. They were the indigenous people and humans were outsiders. But they lost their homes due to the volcano eruption of Kikai caldera and the rising of the sea level 6,000 years ago. I'll go in depth about this when I discuss Princess Mononoke. But these Jomon people were good friends with the Totoro tribe. They were engaged in agriculture but in a small scale. However, the agriculture of the Yayoi people was in a large scale. They cut down the ancient forests to make fuels and to convert them into rice fields. As I said earlier, these ancient forests eventually turned into somewhere easily accessible by humans. The deep forests that had once been filled with the ancient sawtooth oaks and beeches were quickly lost during the Jomon period and became easy-to-use copses. So, what we are seeing right now isn't really natural. We go camping in the mountains and feel the nature, but that nature is a result of humans remodeling the entire Japanese islands through agriculture. 99% of them are not primeval forests anymore. Only the forests created by humans through agriculture remain today. And the ancestors of Totoro, the ancient gods, can't live in this kind of forest. They were really born out of the primordial forests. So, the result of what Okoto described as smaller and stupid is that Totoro, who comes out in the movie, he's only 2 meters tall and can't speak a human language even though he's a god. So this is the actual outcome of how the ancient gods ends up after Okoto says, "We will die out soon. We're growing smaller and we're growing stupid." But instead, they learned to coexist with humans. Specifically, they started eating acorns and living quietly in sacred shrine forests near the outskirts of the countryside, and learned to make pottery from the Jomon people and spinning tops from children in the Edo period. So they learned to live in the shadows. That's why I assume that as a result of the Great War 700 years ago, which I call the Great Mononoke War, the descendants of the ones who were defeated still live quietly all over Japan, like Totoro in Tokorozawa City. So, he's kind of like American Indians who were exterminated by Westerners. He's similar to that kind of indigenous people who lives hiding from the Yayoi people like us who grow rice. So once again, let me quote producer Suzuki's words in the volume of Ghibli's textbook, The Wind Rises. He said, "Miyazaki-san and I originally had this delusion about Totoro. There were many Totoro tribes in this world. They were destroyed after fighting humanity, but survivors appear in various times, such as Mononoke in the Middle Ages, Ghost in the Edo period, and now Totoro. So Totoro carries such a history on his shoulder. It's not just a cute creature, it also contains fear." Miyazaki set this backstory, but kept it hidden for the movie that was targeted for children. But that was not enough for him, so after 10 years, he couldn't bear it anymore, and that's how he ended up making Princess Mononoke. So it's kind of opposite of Star Wars, or should I say it's the same. He first depicted how the story ends, and then he depicted why things happened the way they happened. So, My Neighbor Totoro is actually the sequel of Princess Mononoke. And Miyazaki was really going to stop at My Neighbor Totoro, but he couldn't help. Then why couldn't he? Well, many texts have written about how Miyazaki became more and more obsessed with researching such fields as agriculture during the Jomon period, culture theory, and lore of forests, and so on. That's why he couldn't help telling a story about them. He made Princess Mononoke because he couldn't hide the history which he had in My Neighbor Totoro. Actually, My Neighbor Totoro is related to another work. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind depicts an era where humans live quietly hiding from giant gods, then Princess Mononoke depicts humans destroying giant gods. And My Neighbor Totoro depicts a relationship between human children and a god whose ancestors were once gigantic but has become incomparably small as mankind prospered. So in fact, Miyazaki's works create an interconnected cycle, and so are these three works. But why couldn't Miyazaki stop after making My Neighbor Totoro? Why did he need to give it prequels? Originally, Miyazaki said that Studio Ghibli would be dissolved after My Neighbor Totoro was completed. He thought it was natural for a studio to dissolve after making three works because that's how many one studio could make. That's why he said that Studio Ghibli could dissolve after making My Neighbor Totoro. However, a life-shaking incident for Miyazaki happened at the same time as the release of My Neighbor Totoro, which was the release of Grave of the Fireflies that came out with Totoro. Thanks to this, Miyazaki had to take back his word that he had done everything he wanted to do. He'd really said, after I'm done with My Neighbor Totoro, there's nothing more that I wanted to depict, so I will go back to animator position. But Grave of the Firefly came out and it was a nightmare and it traumatized Miyazaki, and as a result, Miyazaki continued to make more animes. I still haven't touched on the deep theme inside the story nor about the characters. In the second half, I will talk about this nightmare Miyazaki had and discuss how My Neighbor Totoro was made logically to maximum degree and how it's got such beautiful structure. Now, this is it for the free part, so let's do the questionnaire. Isn't this cool? The formation of Japanese islands from 20,000 to 6,000 years ago is just so fun that I can stare at it all day. Sorry, I know the explanation got a little complicated. Okay, now, can I have the result? Next week, so this is the rundown. I'll discuss something called the Sesame Credit. In China, this has been a real hot topic these days and caused a huge controversy. The issue was that what will happen to our economy activities, especially the evaluation economy, in the future. So that's what I will talk about, but I'll try to make it casual. Then the week after that is Homo Deus. That dude, so he wrote, what was it? Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. His latest book is about how humans are finally becoming gods. It's pretty interesting, right? And on September 23rd will be about so-called the future of Miku marriage, and I'll talk about a guy who married a virtual character, Miku Hatsune. He's been on the internet news nowadays. I'm scheduled to go visit his house, talk to him, and ask him to show us many things at his place. I actually see this phenomena quite positively. So that's what I'll be talking about. Then on September 30th, well, I keep pushing back my topics, but I'll talk about Von Braun. Well, I think they are more worth than monthly membership fee, which is 5,000 yen, so please join. Okay, now let's switch to the membership broadcast.